Welcome to Frith Farm. I'm Daniel Mays, the owner, and I guess just talk a little bit about how I started the farm. I guess it was almost 10 years ago. I got this land with a simultaneous easement from Maine Farmland Trust, so that made it much more affordable. I took out a loan to cover the rest of the cost. Yeah, I didn't have much experience at all. I had worked a few partial seasons, but never a full season on a farm. But I was, young and eager to just dive in off the deep end. I've learned a lot since then, and still learning a lot. Here we are. It's 5 open acres, and we'll walk around in a little bit and try to capture that on this little camera. 5 open acres. We grow vegetables on about 3 of them. I guess vegetables, berries, perennials. More and more we're kind of transitioning to more perennials, more fruits, medicinals. I'd say, I guess it's about 2.5 acres of vegetables, about 1/2 acre perennials. We're taking a year off from livestock this year. That's sort of a big move. We've in the past done a lot of different small livestock, chickens for eggs and meat, pigs, sheep, turkeys, but trying to simplify a little bit. Have a little human livestock now, so that's taking a lot of our extra time. So trying to simplify a bit with just the plants. We have, in terms of markets, we grow for about just under 200 CSA families. That's about half of our produce. The other half goes to 4 natural food stores and 1 farmer's market, and a very small on-farm store.
Did you decide to reduce livestock? Well, because of your kiddo, but
partly that, yeah. Partly it was just feeling like a lot, having so many different enterprises crammed on 5 acres. And another big part of that was our nutrient load was just creeping up. Phosphorus, especially, just the soil tests were showing higher and higher phosphorus because we were, bringing in feed for the animals. So bringing in a lot of nutrients and not, just what's going out is in the food that we sell. So not as much going out. So sort of building up over time, and that didn't feel very good. The importing feed from who knows where, like tapping into that commodity system, didn't feel great either. I'd rather be growing the food, not pulling nutrients from the Midwest. So I call this the welcome garden for customers and visitors to the farm. I guess it was 2 years ago, we just sheet mulched this whole area on top of sod. So we did a layer of leaves and then a layer of compost, and then we planted right into it all different perennials for pollinators, for herbs, flowers, cut flowers, and some fruit bushes, elderberries behind me, honeyberries, peach trees, some kind of, you name it, just sticking it in here. And my thought was to sort of welcome people to the farm. They have to walk through this space, which is unlike many other spaces in Scarborough, to sort of show that they're in a different kind of place from the strip malls and office buildings. Because we are just south of Portland, in a pretty developed, kind of on the edge of a developed area, also on the edge of more rural areas, so kind of on that line between those two worlds. So it's nice to give suburbanites an oasis to come to, and also to sort of be a little bit of a melting pot for different demographics of people, because everybody eats. Yeah.
And what are your outbuildings here?
Yeah, so we have the barn here. I guess we could walk and peek inside. This is where the CSA Pickups happen twice a week. COVID response. So even though it's an open air barn, trying to limit how many people come in, ask people to wear masks. And yeah, CSA Pickup is in here every Tuesday and Friday. We have a kind of somewhat unique style of CSA where people get to choose what they take, since we're not pre-packing boxes. So whole share members can choose any 12 items. Half share members choose any 6. If they want to get all the same item or make, double down, that's fine. And we usually have anywhere from 15 to 20 or more items to choose from. So that way nobody's ever taking food home that they don't want. I think that's a real pitfall for CSA and why people don't come back, is because they're taking food they don't want and then it goes to waste and they feel badly about that. So it solves that problem. It also gives us constant feedback on what people actually want to be eating, so we're not trying to force food on them and thinking they like it when in fact they are composting it, because we get that immediate feedback. We keep track of what is taken, and then we'll adjust the harvest for the next time according to that, and then I'll take all that data and adjust what we plant the next year to better match what people are actually taking. So it's a very sort of dynamic, responsive CSA, which feels good because, yeah, the first few years I did the preset sort of this is what you get, and I think, yeah, our retention rate wasn't as good, and yeah, just the feedback from people was, they don't want to be force-fed kohlrabi. Kohlrabi is always the one people pick on, but like choose your thing. Not everyone loves kale, but some people love it, and like those few people get to take as much as they want. It's also great because if we don't have enough of a given crop to feed 200 people, that's okay. We can still put it out there, and when it runs out, then we can put something else out there in its place. And we try to save some of those things we only have a little bit of for the end, so that the latecomers get some treats, and don't always, so it's not slim pickings. Kind of see how we lay out everything on the tables here. And an item is whatever is written on the slate up there. So this year we're pre-bagging all of our greens and stuff, and trying to space things out. Limit the number of people in here. Try to be as clean and safe as possible. We also ask people to sanitize their hands as they enter. That helps if they brush against an adjacent kale bunch. But yeah, a lot of this food people typically cook anyway, so I think it's relatively interesting. So here we have our we call it the community greenhouse, and we sell different potted plants. These are sort of bedraggled by this time of year. We sell a lot in the spring, different perennials, native flowers, and some sort of fruit bushes and trees. And then inside here is where we sell our seedlings in the spring. We're kind of winding down now with that. And then this is also just kind of a hangout space for the crew on rainy days to eat lunch and stuff. And we had fun with the edges. Planted grapes up the side, so eventually these will grow over and they'll have shade in the summer, and all different herbs and perennials that might not quite overwinter in our zone if they weren't in a greenhouse. So that was sort of fun. Definitely this whole courtyard area, the idea is just to kind of encourage people to hang out, instead of just see this as a grab and go food store. It's a destination ideally, and that's part of the value I see in the CSA, is giving people a farm they can feel like is their own in a sense, and they can pick all the flowers and herbs they want, and that's a big part of the CSA. So yeah, lots of cut and come again flowers, and then yeah, lots of culinary herbs along the parking area. Yeah, so I see soil health as I try to learn from nature, I guess, because if humans step away healthy soil tends to generate itself. So I see, like, let's learn from that, and almost have a mentality of instead of like, what can I do to create more soil health, almost like, what can we stop doing to like keep messing with what would all be naturally healthy. So yeah, looking at the sort of principles of a wild natural ecosystem, we see that soil is typically covered. You don't see it in a healthy eco setting. So that's sort of a mantra of the farm here, is never see the soil. I think of the soil as it's like the entrails, it's like the guts of you know, the earth. So we don't want those hanging out in the air any more than the soil wants to be exposed to the elements. So yeah, we really try to stick with that. Anytime we see soil, it should either be planted or mulched over, and ideally it's covered with living plants. That's not the natural model, is sort of maximized photosynthesis. Mulching is great, but it's second best to you know, green cover that is actually feeding the soil, taking carbon from the air, pumping it down through root exudates into the soil, feeding all the organisms. I'm kind of a broken record with the crew, but like I keep saying, like, photosynthesis is the only way to create soil. It's the only mechanism to create soil. Importing compost is great to sort of jumpstart soil health, but it's not creating soil. It's bringing organic matter from elsewhere, where it was created originally by photosynthesis. So to the extent we're not maximizing photosynthesis on the farm, there's an opportunity cost. We're not doing as good a job as we could as farmers. Farmers are really harvesters of the sun. So yeah, photosynthesis, if you remember from high school chemistry, is you know, carbon taken out of the air with sunlight and water, and that forms like organic matter and oxygen. So that's sort of the chemical equation, but you can think of it in any discipline, like basically, yeah, carbon is being sucked out of the atmosphere, which is coincidentally much needed to reduce the global warming effect, but and it's taken in through the leaves, and some of it is used to create the tissues of the plant, the cells of the plant, but a lot of it, up to 40% of it, is actually exuded through the roots via liquid carbon, so starches, sugars, proteins, and that is exuded via the roots to feed organisms in the soil, which eat those sugars and proteins and in turn feed the plant with the nutrients that they release. So it's a symbiosis between the plant and the whole host of microorganisms. And that's kind of the key to healthy soil, is that cycle of carbon being sucked out of the atmosphere, pumped into the ground. And it's those organisms and those exudates that then create humus, which is a stable form of organic matter which builds the soil up. So yeah, we can keep importing compost, but until we like jumpstart that cycle of photosynthesis, it's not sustainable in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's like a really easy evaluation of the farm at any point in the year, really, is to look out and how green is it, how much brown do you see, and that's a good way to try to do better usually. Yeah, and even through the winter, you know, we've been planting more and more winter rye as a cover crop, which will stay green right through the winter, and that's amazing to see, and then just grow back with a lot of energy in the spring. Photosynthesis, soil coverage, minimum disturbance. In nature, you really only see, you know, disturbed soil after a natural disaster, you know, hurricanes, landslides, whatever. So that's certainly natural, but it's not really something I want to emulate on an annual basis on the farm. So yeah, minimize disturbance, So we don't do any tillage, except initially to form the beds. I can talk about that more. And then the last sort of principle that I see in nature is just diversity. Looking at wild spaces, there's never just one or two things growing. It's always like a huge diversity, which is really hard to fit into a commercial farm model. So there's definitely some compromise, but just trying to do more with interplanting and undersowing and just creative crop rotations and perennial hedgerows. Try to just get as much diversity as possible into the farm. So, well, here's a good example of interplanting. This is kind of a riff on the Three Sisters, if you've heard of that, of corn, beans, and squash. So this is corn. This is Abenaki flint corn, which has been grown in this area for thousands of years, and we've interplanted it with various things. There's some peanuts here we're trying out down there, which are getting kind of shaded out, so we'll see how that goes. We threw in some sweet potatoes. They're just starting to go. And then once all that was kind of established, we broadcast some clover in there, so that's just starting to, I think there's a little clover coming there. And then so some beds we have all different combinations that we're experimenting with. This is more of the classic, pole beans, which will be climbing up the corn. And there's squash in there as well, as kind of, I don't know, hidden in there somewhere. But yeah, we're toying around. This is the first time I've tried Three Sisters, so I think getting the timing right of when you plant each of them is something that we could improve on, so that, they're growing kind of evenly and the correct spacing and all that. But yeah, I view this as a kind of cover crop that we're going to get some food from, hopefully. But it's all sort of experimental. I don't expect too much income to come from this, but who knows, maybe it will. But yeah, basically each year I devote a plot to a summer cover crop experiment. And yeah, a plot, so maybe I should talk a little bit about how we organize the farm. I have a engineering background, so I tend to be kind of like left-brained, I guess. I try to temper that side of myself, but yeah, we do have a very sort of standardized system for beds. Every bed is 100 feet long by 5 feet on center, meaning from the center of one bed to the center of the next bed is 5 feet. Paths are about 18 inches wide, so beds are about 42 inches wide. But anyway, so standardized beds, 100 feet long, and then every plot is also standardized. There's 12 of those beds. And then we have, I guess, 18 of those plots. So that just really helps with crop rotation. I try to organize each plot kind of similarly, so within a plot it's mostly the same, family, timing, what have you. And then each year the crop rotation, those plots can just rotate, and I don't have to redesign the whole crop plan, because since every plot is the same size. So yeah, when I talk about plot, I'm talking about 12 100-foot beds, 5 feet on center, so 6,000 square feet in a plot. Yeah, we're constantly adding bits and bobs of perennials, so it's getting a little murky, but yeah, roughly that, and then 4 high tunnels here as well. And the high tunnels are 72 feet long, just because we hit up against our property line there. I would love them to be 96 feet. So it goes. Yeah, and then between each plot, we can keep walking along here. Between each plot, we have these perennial, I call them beneficial beds of all different perennials, flowering perennials to feed the insects. And we also harvest a little bit from them. There are dwarf apple trees in there. There's all different native flowering plants, some service berries, chokeberries. Yeah, kind of you name it. As long as it stays within that sort of 5 to 6 foot width, then we stick it in there, and it's a great visual marker, so we know where one plot ends and the next begins. Because otherwise, if all your beds are just in a line, you can kind of get lost on the farm. So we have a numbering system where you can just say, like, this is plot 8, bed 1, and you know exactly where you are. Bed 1 is always the farthest north. So any member of the crew can just be like, you can be like, go plant kale in plot 10, bed 3, and they know where that is. So that's really helpful, and these beautiful little strips of color help with that. Help just, like, people snack from the berries in them, and we put bird houses in them. And so we have eastern bluebirds and field swallows just kind of singing at us while we work, and they just add a lot to the farm. I really love them. I think they're space well spent. So yeah, let's keep walking along. This is the garlic. It's starting to die back. We wait till there are 3 full dead leaves on the bottom before we harvest. So that usually leaves 5 or so green ones. So yeah, probably next week we'll be harvesting garlic. We grow about, I think it's 19,000 heads of garlic, so that's 2 plots for us. So there's 1 plot, there's another plot way down there. Yeah, I find garlic I love it. I love growing it, and it's pretty profitable as well. Stores well. I look for crops that, if you're thinking economically, crops that have a high price per pound, that store well, and that are well liked by a lot of people. Because that storage window means you have a lot of time to figure out where to sell it. So that's really helpful. And crops that I just like too. So share my passion with other people. But yeah, we grow, I think there's about 6 different varieties of hardneck that we used to keep track of, and now we just mix them all together and call it Frith garlic. But yeah, we used to stress out endlessly about keeping the varieties separate, but we don't market it by variety. We actually have the garlic bloat nematode. We got that like 8 years ago.
Oh wow.
Which means we'll never sell seed garlic. And everyone said, like, oh, you'll never grow garlic again. But we've just been really good about selecting for seed. Any plant that looks suspect, we won't save it, and we won't save any of the plants around it either for seed. So we've kind of selected our way out. At its worst, we lost probably close to half of our garlic crop, and now we lose maybe 1 to 2%. So yeah, that feels good to kind of figure that one out.
Yeah.
They're a little dense, so they're super small. But help yourself.
There they are.
Yeah, all those torrential rains kind of put an abrupt end to strawberry season. All the berries just got mushy. You don't see nature tilling except in like extreme weather events. So it just feels like there's got to be a way to grow food without doing that every season. So yeah, I've been experimenting with that from the beginning. So this is the 10th season, and we're pretty strictly no-till except for opening up plots. I will use the rotary plow on the BCS walking tractor for that, but after that, we're pretty much no-till entirely. The broad fork is kind of the most disturbance will fly, just that and the active transplanting. But otherwise, the soil remains undisturbed. And yeah, there's a lot of benefits to that, because every time we put fast-moving metal through the soil, we're just breaking up all that soil structure. We're directly killing a lot of microorganisms, but we're also destroying their habitat. So a lot die immediately and then a lot die afterwards, and that releases nutrients, which is we get this bump in nutrients, so we feel good sometimes, like maybe that's a good thing, but that is a sort of, we're sacrificing the long-term fertility for short-term gain. So yeah, we've really tried to avoid doing that, and it's working out. We use a lot of compost, or in the past we've used a lot of compost. Now we're switching to more mulches because our nutrient load is high. Like we have, especially the phosphorus. We don't want to keep adding more of that. So now we pretty much just keep a layer of plant matter on the surface. We use leaves, as you see with the garlic here. We get leaves from our local municipality, so that works great. And then we also use wood chips in places that we aren't going to be planting for a while. So the field borders, paths between plots, those are great for wood chips. And even paths between beds, we'll use wood chips. But we don't put wood chips directly on the beds, because when transplanting they might get mixed in, and then they're so carbon rich that they would tie up nitrogen in the soil. So mixing in wood chips is not great. On perennials though, where you're not disturbing the soil at all, even for transplanting, wood chips are fine on the surface. I find they really don't tie up much nitrogen when on the surface. They just kind of act as a nice mulch that holds in moisture. And yeah, I mean, bare soil is just really at risk of damage, both from the act of tilling, but also then from the elements. Rain hitting bare soil causes erosion, period. There's no way to prevent that. We might not see like huge gullies forming, especially if the field is flat, but there's micro erosion of the fine particles in the soil. When rain hits that, they get suspended in that rain droplet. It trickles down into the soil and it carries those fine particles with it. So we're creating compaction. Those fine particles then end up filling all the pore space down low. You end up seeing sort of a layer of more sand, sort of grit on top. And then as those pore spaces are filled down below, the water can't even penetrate anymore, and then it starts running off, and then you start seeing surface erosion. So if you have bare soil, every time it rains, there's micro erosion happening, and if it stays that way long enough, then you'll start to see surface erosion. But really, even just a layer, a single leaf, or will stop that raindrop from absorbing those fine particles. So even just a thin layer of mulch can make a big difference with that. But also for weed suppression. I mean, organic farmers spend so much time fighting the weeds. Why not just prevent them with a layer of mulch that has all these other side benefits for soil health? The thing with no-till is if you let anything go to seed, you don't get to till it under. So all those seeds are right on the surface. So it's kind of extra incentive to not let anything go to seed, and we work really hard to do that. I think it's worth that extra effort each season to then have so much less labor the next season and the next season and beyond. Again, it's sort of this sort of long-term vision, even though in the short term it might seem expensive with more labor, or just tedious with a lot of searching for the weeds in the understory. But yeah, we try to keep a pretty weed-free farm, and definitely a zero seed rain, no weed seed dropping. That's really the goal. So that over time, if we're able to do that, it'll be less and less, and easier and easier each year. And I've seen that in a lot of the farms. Sometimes beds get away from us, and then really regret that. So yeah, this year we're doing an okay job. Drought is really great for staying on top of weeds. But now that we've had a bunch of rain, I expect we'll be spending more time weeding.
How was that dry spell for you?
It was okay. That's another great benefit of not tilling. Is all that soil has natural soil structure and has natural capillary action that can wick up moisture from deep down. When we till, we break those capillary channels, and the soil can no longer wick up moisture to the surface. So then you're relying on overhead irrigation or drip tape. Whereas, yeah, with our soil, like undisturbed soil with a layer of mulch on top is amazingly drought resistant. Needs very little water. We haven't watered this garlic once throughout the drought. And it's suffered maybe a little bit. There's a little browning on the tips. But that's also kind of natural for this time of year. So yeah, this was kind of a test. I was like, oh, should I water it? But no, I think it does amazingly well because it's covered in mulch, and it has that capillary action from the deep reserves of the soil. Yeah, a lot of times farmers talk about like, oh, you need an inch of rain a week, like an inch of irrigation per week. And I think that's true if you're tilling your soils, but if you're tapping into that underground reserve and you're keeping your soils covered in mulches, you really don't need that inch of water coming down from the top, because plants don't care how much is coming from the top, they care what's in the soil. So if your soil's staying moist, you can get away without irrigating for a lot longer. That said, we do irrigate a fair amount for transplanting crops or germinating crops, and definitely throughout the drought that's necessary, because the surface, we need to expose the surface a little bit to be able to direct seed into it. We'll put just a thin layer of bark mulch. Actually, you can see that here. We direct seed right into bark mulch. These little channels, you can see where the cilantro was seeded. And this is just bark mulch, which is a low, basically I treat it like low nutrient compost. So it's just the bark and forest soil that's washed off of tree trunks before they go to the mill for milling. So it's kind of a byproduct of the lumber industry. I figure it has a lot of the good life from the forest in it. And since our nutrient load is high, I don't want to keep using sort of nutrient rich compost. So this is a great sort of low fertility alternative.
Where do you get it?
So I get it through Casella. Yeah, so they're the middleman from the lumber industry, Casella Organics. I'd say like anybody considering no-till, I'd suggest like just try it at a small scale. Even alongside the other way you're used to farming or the other way people are suggesting you farm, and compare it. I don't think you need to go whole hog right off the bat, because there's definitely, I think there's more nuance to it than just sort of tractor-based farming. Because I should say we don't have a tractor. Like we have a tractor for moving compost around, but we don't drive it in the beds. So we don't have any tractor implements for cultivating, for harvesting, for planting. It's all by hand, with the exception of a walk-behind tractor for flail mowing. But yeah, so tractor-based farming, I think, is maybe a little less nuanced. You can just kind of follow the steps, do it. But I don't really know. Actually, I haven't farmed that way, so I shouldn't even talk about it. But yeah, there's definitely like no-till is not. It's not like you do these steps and it'll work great every time. So yeah, I guess I suggest like trying it out, starting slowly with it. Do it for things that are easy, like garlic or transplanted crops, and then see how you like it and do more of that. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan. I'll preach it, but I'm also wary of being dogmatic and saying this is the way to farm, because it's worked well for us here. Yeah, this is one way we use no-till cover crops. This was a plot of overwintered rye, and then we knocked it down at the beginning of June. We have we just have two people with a T-post and some twine to hold it on their foot, and we just step in unison to kind of partially crimp it, but also just knock it down so that then we can drag a tarp over the whole thing to make sure the rye is fully dead. We wait about a week, 10 days, peel that tarp back off, and transplant right through it. If we need extra fertility, we might add a little bit just in the holes as we transplant, a little bit of fertilizer, but ideally we would fertilize before we even plant the rye, so that the rye would take up those nutrients, and then when it dies, it will release them. And yeah, if we get a really good stand of rye, you can see here, it's pretty, that's a pretty convincing soil coverage. And then underneath you see our leaf mulch from last year, you know, and there's fungal threads and worms, and you know, you can't even get down to our native soil for a while. Our native soil is a light brown. It's a loamy sand, so we haven't even reached it here. This is all sort of organic matter on the top. So yeah,
Wow.
this is a really great way to build soil with cover crops. You get that overwintered photosynthesis, like I was talking about. Rye is just an amazing biomass builder. And then you get the soil coverage. It's a little harder to transplant through. Takes a little more time, but I think it's really worth it. And then this straw sort of, you know, feeds the soil for the next couple of years. These are Brussels sprouts that we planted through there. Right now we do 2 plots in rye every year, but I want to increase that. This fall we're going to experiment. I think I'm going to do many more plots, hopefully, but we're going to experiment trying to terminate the rye earlier on some of those beds next spring. I'm going to try to sort of flail mow and solarize when the rye is younger for crops that need to go in earlier. Because these beds, if you wait till the rye is, you know, 6 feet tall, then you tarp it for 10 days, you're talking sort of mid-June before you can plant in those beds. So you miss that planting window for most of your summer crops. Like this is our sort of our later summer crops, Brussels sprouts, or our second round of summer squash in those beds over there. Whereas if we could terminate it earlier for the crops that need to go in sort of, you know, late May, then that would enable us to have rye cover crop on like a lot of the farm, which is great because we think of the winter months as dormant, which they largely are, but just seeing that rye stay green all winter and thinking of all the organisms at its roots that are, you know, probably pretty dormant, but also like right there ready to jump into action in the spring when the rye just explodes. I want to see more of that on the farm. This is our self-seeding cilantro and dill patch. They were always kind of weeds because we'd rotate. So then I'm trying out just growing them in the same place so that the volunteers become part of the crop. Carrot crop, a little bit spotty germination. It was a really like sort of windy, dry, hot and cold spring. It was all over the place, which was really tough on transplants and hard to get things to germinate well. But they're filling out okay. And then, I mean, another great thing about no-till is like we don't have to fork carrots. You watch, like I can just pull this. I can just give a little tug. It comes right up. It's really no, you know, it's the soil tilth is such that. So there's labor savings too, I guess. Even you know, pulling weeds, even there, they just pull right up. So yeah, there's all these sort of tangent benefits of going no-till, of just having soil that's really well covered and good tilth that don't necessarily like show up in your spreadsheet line at the end of the day. And just like the pleasure of planting into like soft black soil. You know, calculate that. I don't know. Salad greens. So here again, we had a summer cover crop here last year. that winter kill, and then we just raked it all into the path. So this path is just, you know, super rich with all that organic matter from, this is all from a summer cover crop. Yeah, and again, you can kind of feel the fungal filaments like holding the soil together. Yeah, you see that. So that's a great part of no-till is that you really allow the fungal communities to develop. Tillage just destroys fungal habitat. You know, any of the mycelial network, you know, it'll regrow, but it takes a long time. You know, sometimes years to really regrow and establish. And so if we're hitting it multiple times a season with you know, a tiller or whatever, it just turns the soils much more bacterial, because bacteria thrive with tillage, which you can certainly grow great crops with bacteria-rich soils, but there's just a lot of benefits to fungal soils. You know, that mycelial, the mycorrhizal connections with plant roots just give it access to so much more soil, so much more water, give it natural resistance to disease and pests. So yeah, fostering those fungal allies is a big part of not tilling. Yeah, mycorrhizal fungus. People don't know about that. Definitely recommend reading about it. You can, you know, look it up online, or a great book is Michael Phillips' Mycorrhizal Planet. He's a great author and really shares his passion for fungi, or teaming with fungi is another one. But basically, mycorrhizal means fungus of the root, and mycorrhizal, and it's just the symbiotic relationship between fungus and plant roots. Mycorrhizal fungi form connections with like almost all terrestrial plants. I think it's 95%. And they just literally like fuse with the cells of the plant roots and extend them, increasing their soil contact by up to like hundreds of fold, potentially. So just, yeah, think of like a plant with one little root versus a plant with 1,000 little roots, and you know that's the difference basically. If you have healthy mycorrhizal fungus, yeah, you can see the fungal action there. And but mycorrhizal fungus is only you know, mycorrhizal. It needs the plant root. It needs a living plant root, and it can only survive with living plants feeding it actively. You know, it can kind of go dormant for a while, or its spores can be there to re-inoculate, but it needs to thrive. It needs that active, you know, photosynthesis, being pumped down into the soil. Because yeah, that's the basis of its existence, is it's bartering with the plants for carbon from the sun. It has no way to harvest its own carbon, so it needs the plant to do that for it. And in exchange, it mines minerals from the soil for the plant roots. So that's sort of the foundational exchange that created photosynthesis in the first place. You know, from the first lichen, that it's like algae and fungi working together to photosynthesize and mine the minerals from rocks, and then those residues eventually form up, and that's what soil is. So yeah, just recognizing that, like, that's how we have all this soil. So let's keep that cycle going, because otherwise all we're doing is losing soil slowly through erosion and not rebuilding it. So here's some more interplantings. This is a bed of peppers, and the peppers take so long to fill out the bed that we do a row of endive down the middle. And these endive are coming out now. They're getting a little too big even, but yeah, so that bed was also endive, and now the peppers are freed up to fill out the bed. It's kind of it was a rough year for transplants, so again, some of these are kind of piddly.
What's this dandelion green looking thing?
Oh yeah, so those are dandelions. These are
Oh.
Italian dandelions. Again, between the pepper plants, these are due to be harvested now. They're ready, and then the peppers will be free to fill out the bed. Yeah, usually the peppers are farther along by this.
Yeah.
By now in the season, kind of a rough spring. We had a couple late frosts too in June that were just kind of spot killed a bunch of them and stunted the others.
Huh.
Yeah, I think a lot of farmers were dealing with some late frosts that killed a lot of transplants. Oh yeah, here's the cherry tomatoes. We grow all the heirloom tomatoes in the tunnels, but the cherry tomatoes we grow outside. Plant the shoulders first thing in the spring to carrots, so that instead of just having this empty bed waiting for tomatoes in the end of May, we have a bed with at least carrots growing. And then the tomatoes get planted between them. And then the carrots will come out and I think we'll replant, lettuce heads there. So again, just trying to keep the soil covered, not just with mulch, but also with photosynthesizing plants. Because cover crops are great, but crops are also great. They also photosynthesize and feed the soil. So yes, we're removing some of that, but we're also leaving a lot of it in place. All those exudates are in place for the soil community. I really like this method of trellising. So this is electrical metal conduit. You can get it at any hardware store, just on 8-foot T-posts. These little greenhouse clamps that go through the hole in the T-post. And then it's just sisal twine hanging from there. So this is a system typically seen more in a high tunnel where you already have, the frame to hang from. But I liked it so much we just built the frame outside, and it's great. We cut off all the suckers and twist it around the twine, and then at the end of the season we just cut the twine and compost everything. So there's no untangling of, synthetic twine and no searching for tomato clips everywhere. I've tried various other trellising methods, and I really like this one.
What's this contraption?
Oh yeah, this is my alpha version of a rolling dibbler. So yeah, it's got the handle here. It's a bit of a beast, but you can hear it coming. And these are set for every 1 foot spacing, 3 rows. Just roll it down the bed, and it leaves little marks where to plant.
Sweet.
Saves the time of measuring tapes.
Wow.
Yeah. So here's tarping in action. Tarping has really gained a lot of popularity in recent years, and I feel mixed about that, because tarping is really useful, I feel like, as a sort of approach to weed management. But it's not like, this is technically soil coverage, but this is not nature's soil coverage. This is an impermeable, synthetic surface that is not letting water through, is certainly not photosynthesizing. So yeah, I don't see this as like, a lot of people think no-till. They think, oh yeah, I'll just buy a bunch of tarps, then I'll be no-till and the soil will be super healthy. Tarping is going backwards in soil health. Anytime there's not a layer of living green on a bed, we're going backwards in soil health. I think that's really kind of key to understanding what I'm trying to say about photosynthesis. It's like, that's the only way forward. Anytime we're not doing that, we're going backwards. So tarping is definitely, a disturbance. We're going backwards in the natural succession of things. But it's really useful for flipping beds. We just had salad greens here. You can see they didn't quite reach the end here, so there's some spinach and arugula sticking out. So we just flail mow those, which chops up all the residues, leaves them on the surface. And then we pull a tarp on it just for a few days, and that's enough to kill the roots so they don't regrow. we peel the top off and seed our next succession. And we'll just stagger the seeder so it's going between the stubble of those salad greens. So yeah, tarps are great for managing weeds, for flipping beds, but don't think that just because you're tarping your soil is going to be healthy. Yeah. So we wait till July, and that also gives us time to grow a nice big stand of peas and oats, which then we knock down and tarp just like the rye. That's what this is here. A nice mat of peas and oats. And then to plant the potatoes, we use a rock bar, which is a big steel pole with a wedged end, and just like swivel it around a little bit. Make a hole just big enough for a potato and poke the potato down in through the peas and oats. The rock bar is super heavy, so you can go, you can get it nice and deep, 6 inches deep. So yeah, there was a hole that probably didn't get planted. So yeah, you just poke the potato piece down in there and close it back over, and then just for a little extra soil coverage, we put some bark mulch on top, and the potatoes should just grow up through all of that. Yeah. And then digging the potatoes is the hard part, because that's going to be like tillage basically. We're going to be like hand tilling the bed with a digging fork. But that's the price of growing potatoes this way. I have heard about trying to grow them. You just put them on the soil surface and then roll out straw on top of them, and they just grow up through the straw, and then you just peel the straw off and harvest your potatoes right from the top of the soil. And I tried really hard to find some organic straw this spring to do that, but kind of have to get on that the year before. So next year we'll do it that way. So yeah, this is like what the peas and oats look like after the tarp comes off. This was a pretty good stand. It formed this nice mat of straw that you peel off, and there's lots of life under there. See the worm castings and the spiders running around. So again, just sort of nature's model. Just don't disturb it. All the life will move in.
Yeah.
So here's a good example of beds that were tarped after the first round of salad greens. Then we peel off the tarp and plant. And you can see here the chaff of the previous crop. This is I think these are arugula stalks that were going to flower, and then the radishes are just planted right between them. Or maybe that was spinach, I don't know. We try not to do back-to-back brassicas.
Mm-hmm.
You can see flea beetles on them. We don't row cover them this time of year. They get a little bit of damage, but usually it's not too bad. So this is one we just did this year. We just sheet mulched over pretty rough ground. This was woods a couple of years ago. The tree line came out to where we're standing. So this was just full of tree roots and stuff, so we had to kind of dig out a little bit. And so to clear those woods, I cut the trees and we rented a stump grinder and ground out the stumps. But then there's still all the lateral roots that are in there still, but are feeding the soil, so that's good. But yeah, there's some different shrubs and some trees planted in here, and we'll also plant flowers and other perennials. Trying to max out this little property. Here's our other plot of garlic.
It's a lot of garlic you got.
A lot of garlic, yeah. Yeah, and there's some weeds in here because we started weeding it, but the beehives, even though they're way over there, I think the bees were having a cranky day, and they weren't happy with us being in their radius. So we got a couple stings. So now that the sun's out, they should be. Oh, that's a bee right there.
Okay.
Here we go. These are our piles. Love our piles. We got leaves from the local local township. Yeah, Scarborough grown leaves here. It was a massive year last year, so lots of oak trees in them. We have a nice oak cover crop on some things from being mulched. And yeah, that's the beneficials bed. The butterflies on the butterfly weed, that's appropriate.
Good, good.
Yeah, bark mulch, like I was talking about before, sort of low, we use it like a low nutrient compost. Wood chips, great for areas you're not growing in, like pads. We also inoculate, we spread wine cap spawn underneath before we wood chip an area, so that when you know, after that's sort of inoculated and then every time it rains we get some wine cap mushrooms growing up in the pads. It's fun.
That's great. Happy people.
Yeah, that's the goal. Here's another interplanting that is a little rough to see. There's some radishes in between the onions. And yeah, the radishes kind of struggled with the hot, dry. But they're coming along. So all up. This was another area that was just like a bunch of piles of stuff, but we turned it into beds. So they're just establishing now, but a bunch of cherry trees, an apple tree, a mulberry tree. Some more spotty germination on the carrots. Keep blaming the weather. That's what farmers do, right?
Yep.
We plant asparagus or strawberries in between our high tunnels, try and make use of that awkward space that needs to be there to remove snow. So woody perennials wouldn't work because you need to be able to drive the tractor over there to remove snow. So things that die back, herbaceous perennials are great because the ground will be frozen, so you can drive over it without impacting it. Here's the kale. Not the finest kale we've ever grown, but we undersow the kale to parsley because, again, I was talking about mycorrhizal fungus. There are a few families that actually don't form connections with mycorrhizal fungus, even though 90 or 95% of all plants do. Actually, a lot of the plants we grow as vegetables don't. So anything in the brassica family, anything in the beet family, anything in the Polygonaceae family, the sort of dock rhubarb. So those don't form those connections, so they're not feeding those mycorrhizal populations. So if we grow a whole plot of nothing but brassicas, we're actually kind of starving out the mycorrhizal fungus. So we put a little parsley underneath them. It's not really feeding them a huge amount, but it's giving them a little lifeline to hang out there, so that when the next crop goes in, they're there and ready to form those connections. That is elecampane, which is a great sort of sunflower-like thing. It looks like it's out of the Jurassic period with these huge leaves.
It's so cool.
It's not native, but it's a great medicinal plant. The root is medicinal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we have marshmallow and more elderberry and service berries in here. Another just sort of awkward triangle that got planted with perennials. Speaking of awkward triangles, this is the crew garden. Since I get a lot of questions from the apprentices of why don't we grow this, why don't we grow that, I said, well, why don't you grow it? So this is where they're doing all their sort of fun experiments. We have corn, squash, and lentils there. Then there's, I mean, they should really be telling you about it. They have all different combinations of things here. Yeah, so this crew garden is just sort of a fun place for the crew to do whatever they want. My only stipulation is they can't let weeds go to seed. Yeah, another plot of onions. We grow 2 plots of garlic, 2 plots of onions. So that's almost a quarter of the farm in allium here. The summer squash, looking good.
Oh yeah. Wow. It's looking great.
Then, another benefit of not using a tractor in the fields is we planted this row of high bush blueberries that are still pretty small, but they're right at the end of the beds for some mid-harvest snacking. But yeah, you couldn't do that with a tractor-based farm because you need the room to turn around. That's another plot of rye. You can see the transplants through it. From day one, I've been full-time farmer, no off-farm income. I had a little bit of savings coming into it, but not much, and I took a loan to buy the property, so I've been paying that back. Yeah, just purely from the farm, no other outside income. It was just me when I started. I now have a partner. She works part-time on the farm, but also full-time as a mom. So yeah, no outside income there either. So yeah, MOFGA's been super supportive. I was part of the JP program my first 2 years, and just almost like the social support too of having the listserv of farmers, mostly like-minded folks who can commiserate with what's going on. That's just been super helpful. It still is super helpful. Maine Farmland Trust, huge support because they helped to purchase the easement on this property, along with the Scarborough Land Trust. There's a little walking trail that they have an easement on too, so the public can come onto the farm. So yeah, that really made it affordable where it wouldn't have been otherwise for me, being in a pretty development pressured area. Yeah, I'd say my dad's been a huge help. He's retired and helps out here and there, a lot with childcare right now. Yeah, no, my family's been great. They, sort of maybe raised an eyebrow when I first came up with this idea, but they've been very good getting on board. And yeah, I think they love to visit. And yeah, my sister's super supportive as well. She's a big food person. So yeah, I feel very lucky, very privileged to have those supports, and the NRCS programs too. I've gotten some grants through them for high tunnels and irrigation. That's definitely been helpful, sort of accelerating the establishment of the farm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, neighbors too, like the Jack across the street is an old-time farmer from Scarborough, and yeah, we don't hang out too much, but he's always there to bend an ear. Yeah, and just the apprenticeship program that MOFGA facilitates has been awesome. Just connecting with, when I started out, they were my age, and now they're getting younger and younger every year. Just that sort of energy, that new energy that people bring to the farm each year, and I learn a lot from them. Just the ideas they bring, and point out when we're doing something stupid, and yeah. So I really love that part of this kind of farming. So I call this a human scale farming. We're pretty much human powered. A few machines, but we really do most of our work by hand, and that just means we have a lot of hands, and a lot of people, a lot of minds, a lot of fun. I think just going back to those natural principles of diversity. Well, humans are part of nature, so the diversity of human minds and ideas and experiences adds to the landscape as well. yeah, we have I think about 10 employees growing on 3 acres, which is pretty odd ratios for most farmers to hear, but it means we're able to grow really intensively and produce a lot of food on a small area.
That's awesome. And they're not all apprentices?
No, we have some hourly folks, but yeah, I love the apprenticeship model. It's just a matter of more housing to have more apprentices. But yeah, I think we have basically 4 apprentices this year. We have 4 people living here anyway. I would say, like, if you want to farm, like, start farming. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need to buy land. You don't need to have it all figured out. But like, even if it's in your backyard, like, start a plot. Like, because there's no matter how much you listen to this kind of thing or read books, watch videos, like, you're not gonna get that experiential learning that is irreplaceable. Just like watching life happen. So yeah, whatever scale, whatever access you have, go for it, I'll say. Yeah, that's sort of what I did. I didn't really know what I was doing, and it worked out for me. So.
And you said you came from an engineering background?
Yeah, so I studied engineering in grad school.
Yeah.
And environmental engineering, sort of looking at energy efficient building design mostly, but also just sort of systems and efficiency, that kind of thing. Those are some really useful ways of thinking. They're also some pretty narrow ways of thinking, so it feels like a useful tool to employ and to also set down sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, I feel very lucky to have that toolkit of, crunching numbers and penciling things out with an engineering mindset, but also recognizing that nature doesn't think that way. So yeah, sometimes it has its limits.
Mm-hmm. And did you come to this right out of school?
Yeah, pretty much. Mm-hmm. Pretty much. I started, or I helped start a little CSA operation on with a couple friends on one of their parents' lands, and that was awesome. I had a great time, and just realized I wanted to do it more seriously and sort of as my own thing. So I started looking for land right after that.
What brought you to farming? Anyone?
Yeah, sure. Well, speak at once. Just to be producing good food for good people, and to be a part of, like, the steward of the land to do that.
Yeah. Did you guys come from farming backgrounds?
Kinda, yeah.
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 I studied sustainable ag in school, and just kind of got driven to do something with my spare time.
And for me, engineering, and switched over from working in the office to trying to do something with sustainability, something in nature, and farming seemed like a really good method to get into something where helping, like, get good food to good people. That was like.
Do you have any advice for someone who's considering, a young person maybe, or not even a young person, but someone who's like wants to throw everything aside to try this?
Do it.
Jump in fully.
Oh, really?
Don't just dip a toe in. I'd say if you're gonna do it, jump in fully.
Oh, I was gonna say dip a toe in. I was gonna say the other way. Just do whatever you want to do, but do at least one toe. Yeah.
I think I did 3 volunteer days, one of them here, and then was like, I'll go do an apprenticeship.
Nice. So you dipped a toe.
I did. I dipped toes in, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, some sort of, like, consistency is really good to, like, just, like, it's not really the type of thing that, like, you really benefit from just doing, like, one day of. I mean, like, yeah, you, like, come home and, like, get to take a shower and be clean again, but, like, I think, like, the pattern of the work itself going off of like what Dennis is saying is that you like feel more of a system of like getting good food to good people.
Mhm.
All people.
Yeah.
But